Welcome to Spiritual Psychology. My name is Renee Lavallee McKenna, and I bring my 30-plus years as a recovering addict and ex-crazy person turned therapist and shamanic healer to bring you snackable teachings on spirituality, psychology, and all things personal growth. And today I want to talk about shamanism and power, and specifically how shamanism is a power tool. And I've come to think of most spiritual practices and religions and self-care techniques as tools that connect us with ourselves, with the ground of being, the larger consciousness system, and the transpersonal realms that have only our highest good in mind, also known as God. And we really need these tools to help us connect with and conceptualize this great and mysterious life force that we are all a part of, and that's a part of us. And the great thing about tools in both the physical and the metaphysical realms is that tools allow us to do things easily, quickly, and efficiently that can be difficult or even impossible without the tools. Try to hang a heavy picture on your wall without using a hammer or a screwdriver. I was cleaning my garage recently and I have this huge armoire that's super heavy and I wanted to move it from one side of the garage to the other. And it was way too heavy for me to push. So I decided to try to drag it on a blanket. But I couldn't even get it on the blanket. And then I thought, I'll create a fulcrum. And so using 2 pieces of wood, I was able to jam one lengthways underneath it and then put another piece of wood perpendicular underneath the wedged piece. So it was like a seesaw. And I just stepped down on the up end of that seesaw wood and it lifted this huge armoire. Matter of fact, it lifted it so easy. I was like, oh, because the tool worked so well. And I jammed the blanket under both sides of it using that little fulcrum and I dragged it across the room all by myself. So tools can make things that would seem impossible, possible. And even easy. And shamanism is a tool, one of the most ancient and easily accessible tools for connecting directly with the non-physical realms of spirit, consciousness, and the universal life force. Now, I'm an extremely practical person, and my bullshit meter has always been very well tuned. And I was extremely skeptical in my first introductions to shamanism. And this idea of doing an inner journey, listening to somebody play a drum to connect with spirit guides and teachers all felt way too woo-woo for me. And I have to be honest, I still don't love the words around spiritual work because they're limited. They still can create prejudice even in me. We're taking these immense, almost infinite concepts and bringing them down to try to fit them into our little conceptual minds using these super limited words. But it's the best we got as humans trying to communicate with each other. So talking about shamanism, thinking about shamanism, in fact, the word shamanism itself can be controversial. It came out of the Tsungus tribe in Siberia. And there's a lot of talk about cultural appropriation with shamanism. And I felt that when I first approached this. We don't play drums like that in the Boston area. It wasn't part of my cultural upbringing. In fact, I was a cultural Catholic. There was a little part of me that thought this was all a little bit voodoo for me. But luckily I had a teacher who didn't do a lot of talking and just said, here, listen to this rhythm on these headphones. And she gave me some simple instructions. And that experience changed my life. I slid down this tunnel into this place in nature that I felt I had always known. And my connection with my primary spirit guide or teacher in animal form has been with me since that day. And for my spiritual understanding was probably with me before this lifetime and will be part of the team that will escort me into the next place when I leave my body. And because this is sacred material, I never talk casually about my power animal, and I only reveal its form when it feels helpful or appropriate to do that. Because it really doesn't matter to anybody else what the form is, it just matters to me. And in shamanism, using the shamanic journey, listening to some kind of a rhythm, doesn't have to be a drum, or a rattle. I've really come to love binaural beats, which you can find all over Spotify and YouTube. And the rhythm itself is a tool. It helps to create a theta state very easily, just like lifting that arm wow with the fulcrum. And in that state, which is similar to daydreaming or light meditation, when our conscious mind is a little bit relaxed and out of the way, we can access really infinite realms of consciousness, which are always available to us. It's part of our birthright, and it's incredibly healing and empowering to do that. And in shamanism, historically, just like in many of the world's major religions, the shaman did the work for the seeker or the client. And in how I was taught and how I teach others, we each have the ability to become a shaman ourselves, to make a mystical or direct connection with God, nature, or the spirit world, all by ourselves. Now, there's a lot happening in non-ordinary reality, and just because things don't have a body doesn't mean they have our highest good in mind. And certainly in the contested space of middle world, which is full of suffering, fear, ignorance, and selfishness, we want to be careful what we're working with. And one of the most amazing things about shamanic practice is that it is a direct highway to very high, very pure levels of consciousness. And just experiencing or grounding in, developing relationships with this higher consciousness in form is incredibly transformative and healing. And my experience with shamanic practice was so profound, I knew it was the work that I wanted to do, is to share this with others. And so I've spent the last 20 years learning and seeking and developing to be able to do that. And the way I teach shamanism is based on what the anthropologist Michael Harner developed and called core shamanism. Harner's dead now, but his organization, the Foundation of Shamanic Studies, continues to teach people. I'll put a link in the show notes. He was an anthropologist in South America in the 40s who had a profound shamanic experience, not unlike my own and many of my clients, changed his life, opened his mind. It didn't convince him that there was more going on than meets the eye in the material world. He experienced spiritual reality. And shamanism's not the only tool for doing that, but it is a very easily accessible one. And currently, psychedelics like ayahuasca, peyote, and DMT have made a big resurgence, and these are tools to have a spiritual experience. But I'm going to tell you, you don't have to go to Peru and study with a shaman or take hallucinogens to have a spiritual experience. Now, those are tools that a lot of people benefit from, and I certainly understand the value of ritual and ceremony and having human guides. I consider myself a midwife or a navigator for people's soul experience. But complicated tools can become a barrier to actually doing the work. I don't have to have a screw gun to hang my picture on the wall. An old-fashioned screwdriver or even a rock and a nail can work just fine. I'm pretty unattached to what gets people there, the vehicle that will bring you into conscious contact with divinity as it wants to express itself to you. But I do take issue if the vehicle itself can become a barrier. There are many paths up the mountain of spirit, lots of vehicles that will take us there. Prayer, meditation, yoga, surfing, psilocybin, guided imagery, the shamanic journey, just to name a few. And those can all kind of take us to a similar destination or the same place. It's just a different experience on the way up. You want to take a bus, drive your own car, ride a mountain bike, or hike. And I think it's good to experiment. I did a ton of psychedelics as a teenager, and by the time I came to this work, I was clean and sober, so I guess I've chosen the hiking path. But you can trust that whatever map you're given is probably the one that will work for you. Because God is always trying to get in touch with us. The life force lives within us, keeps our heart beating. The intelligent design in this unfathomably complex, interactive web of life. And aligning our consciousness with higher consciousness is part of our evolutionary process as humans, I believe. So whatever gets you there, it's all good. But I like the idea that easy is right. And over time with myself and many of my clients, the need for the tools becomes less and less. After 20 years of practice and spending time each day with my clients in non-ordinary reality, the veil between the worlds is very thin for me. And that door is almost always open. And although I certainly continue to have my share of human challenges, my experience of the ground of being that is wise, compassionate, and really has my highest good in mind is more easily accessible to me than ever before. And that spiritual disconnection that was central to my own existential suffering is central to the suffering of most people that I know and work with. And again, shamanism and the shamanic journey particularly can provide not just connection, guidance, wisdom, but incredible healing, transformation, and empowerment. All of the processes in my book, Allies and Demons, Working with Spirit for Power and Healing, have a shamanic element within them. I have a client who's originally from South America, very high-functioning person who lives between two cultures and came to America not just for the opportunities for themselves, but to be able to earn money and send it home. But they've reached a turning point in their life where just doing things to benefit others is not enough, and they need to care for themselves. Outwardly, everything looks good in their life, great job, house, spouse, but inside their life is void of purpose, deeper meaning. Their soul is not being fed. And so they've been doing some really profound and deep healing work with me, connecting with themselves on a soul level, transforming early childhood trauma and neglect so that they can bring all of their life experience to benefit themselves and those they love from a place of wholeness, intention, and empowerment. In the first journey we did, they connected with Panther in a place in the lower world similar to the jungles of their native country. And Panther told them, "I am here to set you free, to connect you with your own wild, essential nature and assist you in finding the joy and fulfillment that you most deeply seek." It was a deeply emotional experience for them to have access to the power of something that knew them so well. She's a project manager in construction. She said, "I didn't think this stuff would work for me. And how is it that I had to come to America to connect with my spirit guide that is a guide that many of the native people from my country connect with at home?" But that's the windy path that many of us travel. And in many traditions, it is understood that most of us have become disconnected from our spiritual nature, from our own wise and wild self. And the experience of connecting in this very direct way can bring us an experience of wholeness and give us access to power way beyond our limited resources in our individual body-mind-spirit complex. But doing shamanic journey work is like eating a delicious, nutritious meal. And we can talk about the meal, and I can tell you about the organic vegetables and the aroma of the sauces, the tang of the spice. But describing the food does not nourish my body. And I have to eat the food myself to taste and smell and experience that meal in order to absorb the nutrients that are necessary to sustain me. And talking about spiritual practice is the same thing. It's like talking about eating dinner. You can starve to death talking about eating dinner. So my greatest hope is to bring this work to the widest audience possible, make it as easily digestible as I can. And so we've created a digital course. It's going to be a series of them, actually. But the first one is ready now. Intro to Shamanism, Lower World. Very accessible and easy to follow course to teach you how to journey into the lower world to connect with nature spirits in whatever form is most meaningful to you. And we don't decide that. Spirit knows what we need better than we do. We'll connect you with the spirit guide in animal form that can guide and empower your life. And we're going to have an accompanying private Facebook group with weekly practice, lots of resources, and I'll be there as a soul mentor to support the members each step of the way. If you already have a shamanic journey practice, I'd love to have you be part of this group. Reach out to me, info@reneemckenna.com. I find a mix of individual and group community support to be a really healthy and optimal blend. Keep us moving on the path of our own highest good. So there's a link in the show notes if you want to learn more about that course and give yourself or someone you love the gift of spirit. If you have a topic you'd like to hear about on this podcast, you can DM me on Instagram @Renee Lavallee McKenna. Thanks as always to my supporters on Patreon, and blessings on your path until we meet again. This is Renee Lavallee McKenna for Spiritual Psychology.